talk about Mayor Pete for a second, because we've talked a lot about his support among African Americans, or his lack of support among African American voters. But he also seems to have a Latino challenge. There was a piece in NBC Think that I want to read to you. It says, as for the Buttigieg Latino policy plan, it felt to many Latinos like just another example of a candidate playing last-minute catch-up with an electorate that will play a crucial role in key primaries and the general election. Candidates like Sanders have made winning new Latino support a central part of their overall primary strategy. The same can be said for Elizabeth Warren, while the Buttigieg campaign is seemingly now waking up to the fact that primaries such as Nevada, California, and even Puerto Rico are just as important as states like Iowa and New Hampshire. I mean, he's got a plan. Everybody seems to have a plan. Is that enough to actually court this electorate?
I think that you have to have a plan that deals directly with the issues and a track record to make people believe that you just didn't go and make a plan up in the back room when you decided to run for president. Why should we believe you? And what have you done to demonstrate that this plan is something that you, in fact, have been committed to all of your life, or at least your political life? I think that's the problem. And I think that advocates in the black and brown community that have been fighting these issues for a long time know who has been there, who has not been there, and that is why they put their feet to the fire. That's their job, to put their feet to the fire.
I mean, Ron, Biden campaign has enjoyed support from Latino voters, specifically from older Latino voters. What do they need to do in order to engage the younger element of this vote? I mean, when you talk about the Latino vote, you are in actuality talking about the youth vote.
Yeah, no question about it. And, you know, we need to keep on working harder to get our message out there and to engage these voters. I was with the vice president recently in Nevada, where we met with a lot of Latino voters and younger voters. We're in California as well. We need to get out across our 100-day plan on immigration that the vice president released last week. We need to get out his record fighting for immigrants' rights and fighting for social and economic justice for people of color, for both the black and the brown community and all people of color. I think I agree with the Reverend. It's both about your plan and your record. And Vice President Biden has both. That's why I think as you look at the polls, he's the one candidate that's doing well in all 4 of the early states, not just Iowa and New Hampshire, but also Nevada and South Carolina. I think our nominee has to show that they can do well in all 4 of those states that represent the full diversity of our party. And I think right now, Vice President Biden's running strongest across those 4 states.
But you also see Bernie Sanders showing a lot of strength with this demographic, as I said earlier, because it is a very young voting bloc, and there is an appeal to younger voters that Sanders is able to make.
That's exactly right. And he got the coveted endorsement from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at a time when his campaign was sort of stumbling or struggling. And I really feel like that revived not just his standing overall, but especially with younger Latino voters. She's doing keynote speeches completely in Spanish at events for him. That's not something you see happening with other 2020 Democratic campaigns. And it's a step above saying, oh, well, we had a Spanish language ad that we put out, you know, when we launched, or we had our website translated into Spanish when we launched. That's not the same as having a representative there with you who can vouch for you and speak the same language as these voters who are there to figure out whether or not they want to support you. But, you know, we think about the 2018 midterms as a big sort of playbook for Democrats and the way to win. But in 2018, during the midterms, 49% of Latinos were not contacted by any political party or any political campaign, yet 79% of them still went out to vote. So I don't think Democrats can just hope that they'll turn out to vote in an election like this if they're feeling ignored from the very start of all of this while Iowa is happening, New Hampshire is happening, and they're waiting to see what candidates will do and say to them.
Especially, Mayra, because the Trump campaign is actively going after these voters. There was a point in the cycle where they had aired more Spanish language ads than all of the Democratic candidates combined. And they're not just going after Latino voters in Florida or in Arizona. They're going after Latino voters in states like Pennsylvania, Minnesota. Where does the Trump campaign have room to peel off Democratic support?
Look, as you were saying, Alicia, many of these candidates have created a plan, and that is great. It's encouraging, and many of these plans are more in depth than we've seen previous candidates in terms of immigration. You know, saying immigration reform is not enough. Right now, we want specific examples of what that looks like. What's your 100-day plan? But beyond plans, like, we have to remember that 47% of Latinos in this country are eligible to vote and not registered. So beyond plans, it's so important that campaigns are building infrastructure not just in these early states, but in states like Texas, where almost half the electorate is not registered to vote. And what that means is the campaigns that are going to be doing the best with Latino and who are doing the best with Latino outreach are those campaigns that are creating infrastructures in the state, that are creating entry points for Latino voters to engage. And as was said earlier,
Mayra, here's the thing.
yes,
I understand that there is the infrastructure piece of it, but there's also the Trump campaign actually trying to make an argument to Latino voters about why they should consider voting for Trump. The president gave a speech recently at Turning Point. Take a listen.
Throughout the Western Hemisphere, we are facing down the evil forces of communism and socialism. I've taken historic actions to confront the brutal regimes in Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, and we stand with the people of those nations in their righteous struggle for freedom. To those who would try to impose the horrors of socialism on our country, I say to you again tonight, America will never be a socialist country.
Mayra, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. I hear that, and I think that is a play for Florida Latino voters. You have worked in the Sunshine State. Is socialism the boogeyman that President Trump wants it to be in the Latino community?
If Democratic candidates don't address it, then yes. And part of it is that Trump doesn't need to convince these voters to vote for him. He just has to say enough. He just has to make Latino voters believe that their traumas in their Latin American countries are not relevant to these Democratic presidential candidates. And we've seen that some Democratic presidential candidates are addressing it head on. And again, like, he doesn't need to persuade these voters. He just needs to convince them that Democrats don't care, and then they don't turn out to vote. And so we need to make sure that we're addressing this head on and acknowledging that the traumas and pains of people coming from Latin America under corrupt governments are real, and making distinctions between that and our democratic process here in this country.
Ron, there are demographics, there's infrastructure, there's fundraising. We've talked about all of that. And then there are policies and ideas. Bret Stephens making the argument that Democrats just need modest ideas. Let me read this. What would work? Smart infrastructure spending, new taxes on carbon offset by tax cuts on income and saving, modest increases on taxes on the wealthy, matched to the promise of a balanced budget. What these proposals lack in progressive ambition, they make up in political plausibility and the inherent appeal of modesty. They also defeat Trump's most potent re-election argument, which is that no matter who opposes him, he's running against the crazy left. When your goal is to wash your hands of something bad, you don't need a sword. Soap will do. Ron, do you agree?
No, I don't. I think we need more than soap. We need a real thorough cleansing here. And that includes, look, both things. One, every Democrat running for president has to explain how they will beat Donald Trump, because no bold idea will become a reality unless Donald Trump is defeated. So that is definitely step one. It is part one of the argument, no question. But it doesn't stop there. For the reasons that Mayra has said and Reverend Al has said, we need to inspire our voters and get them out. And that means you need to say, once you get Trump out, what you will do once you get in. Can you bring in Democrats up and down the ballot to help you pass progressive policies? Do you have progressive ideas on health care, on immigration, on climate change, on the whole array of issues Democrats care about? And so I think our candidates on the stump need to do both these things, because you can't really change this country unless you can get rid of Donald Trump, bring in more Democrats, and then have the bold ideas to execute. Again, I'm a Biden supporter. I think Joe Biden is doing that, but I think that's the burden on all of our Democratic candidates this time to make that case.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.